Let's talk to our friend Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk and the author of Father of Mine, which is now $3.99 if you care to get it, the ebook. Good to see you, Mike Florio. How are you, sir?
Rich, I am doing great, pal. It took me a while to get over jet lag after coming home from Las Vegas, but it was worth it. Mm-hmm. And now we just brace ourselves for the roller coaster ride that begins next week in Indy.
That's right. I had to overcome stomach lag, Mike, from Vegas. Oh, I mean, but that was I mentioned yesterday that should be in the NFL rotation for the Super Bowl, right? I mean, Vegas. Would you not agree with that, Mike?
Yeah.
Or no?
I don't know if there is a rotation. We talk about a rotation, and then there isn't a whole lot of rotating. It's a bunch of cities that we don't expect to be in a rotation. I think it should be in Las Vegas and Miami every 5 years. We're already 5 years removed from the last time it was in Miami, and it's not in Miami this year or next year or the year after that. And Las Vegas needs to be in that once every 5 year thing too, that they just can't settle on, because there's a lot more than 5 cities that are in a position to host it. So I don't know that there ever will be a rotation, but if there is, Las Vegas definitely needs to be in it.
Well, I guess also the draft is now part of a rotation, right? Like they can actually start combining the two decisions together where, again, Nashville was such a great draft city. I'm looking forward to going back there for that. They're building a stadium, so I'm assuming I'll be going there for a Super Bowl at some point. You know, maybe sometime this decade. I kind of dig it. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it immensely. You know.
Yeah, I thought it was a great week. And again, I hope that it finds a way back there more often than not. I know it got a little crazy. Traffic was a little tough, but it is in every city that hosts the Super Bowl. So I agree with you. There should be a rotation, and Las Vegas should be one of the top 2 cities in it. For me, it would be Miami and Las Vegas every other year, just ping pong back and forth between the two, but they don't listen to me about that or anything else.
That's right. Mike Florio, but they hear. They certainly hear. They may not listen, but they hear. Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk here on the Rich Eisen Show. So what is the timing, do you think, on the Bears' decision first overall? Walk me through what you think the timing is from new league year starting March 13th. The combine is next week. The draft, as we all know, is when this is definitely going to have to come out in the wash. What do you think the timing is, though, on when they're going to make their decision? If Justin Fields does have to get traded, does that have to happen by new league year? What's your 2 cents on that, Mike?
When I saw Albert Breer's report from Monday that the Bears expect to have their plan in place next week at the scouting combine, my first thought was, does that mean they're trading the first overall pick? Because how can you have a final plan in place that you're going to trade Justin Fields and take Caleb Williams, if that's who they would take, until you've done all of your proper due diligence on which of the quarterbacks you would take with that first overall pick? It made me think that they're hoping to set up something like they did last year, where they trade that number 1 overall pick and get a lot in return, possibly a first-round pick next year that becomes the number 1 overall pick again, like last year's did. And that may just be my bias, because I think they should keep Justin Fields. I think that they should see what his ceiling is, and they should take that huge lottery ticket that is the first overall pick and turn it into as many players as possible. Because, Rich, we know there's no guarantee that any draft pick is going to pan out. At one point last week, I looked back through the first overall picks who were quarterbacks. I'm not comfortable with that success rate. I'm not sufficiently comfortable to go all eggs in the basket. Now, maybe it works out, but I think you got a better chance to turn that pick into multiple picks and get more players and put a better team around Justin Fields.
So then who's the team, do you think, that would be the Godfather offerer, Mike?
You know, great question. Depends on how far the Bears want to go. You know, there was talk last year that they were initially going to do a flip-flop with the Texans, because the Texans supposedly would have taken Bryce Young,
yes,
and then the Bears would have moved down again from number 2. They could move down not very far, still get a quarterback, and still trade Justin Fields. I mean, there's a lot of different ways this could go, and one of the reasons I think Justin Fields is getting frustrated, he wants to know what's going on. We all want to know what's going on, and that is a testament to how well the Bears are keeping the cards close to their vest. Nobody knows what they're going to do. That's the best strategy for the Bears. even if it makes us in the media and Bears fans frustrated and Justin Fields frustrated to the point where he taps out of following the Bears on social media.
Well, again, he said that was because he was going on vacation, and the algorithm on his Insta keeps feeding him posts about his career and his future that he just doesn't want the negativity when he's trying to tap out.
Well, he must not have an X account if he's trying to avoid negativity.
That's funny. So the timing is of interest because I'd imagine a team that wants to get Justin Fields or would be interested in getting Justin Fields would want to get that settled by the new league year, right? I mean, I imagine what that would be. And in terms of the new league year, there's two quarterbacks that we know for sure, it does appear, to be on the market. It'll be Kirk Cousins and Baker Mayfield. What's your reporting or what you're hearing about those guys and their possibility of finding either new teams or re-signing with their ones?
Well, Rick Stroud, who covers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers very well for the Tampa Bay Times, reported recently that if the Bucs tag anyone, it will be Antoine Winfield Jr., their all-pro safety, not Pro Bowl, but all-pro safety. That means Baker Mayfield heads to the open market unless they work out a contract with him. So he's potentially in play. Kirk Cousins is waiting for something substantial for the Vikings, so I think have accepted the fact they want to see what else someone will do and then maybe try to swoop in and match it or beat it if some other team is willing to do better than the Vikings are. But, you know, Rich, even though we're 3 weeks away from the start of free agency and 19 days away from what we lovingly call the legal tampering window, the real tampering is next week in Indy. The real tampering happens when all of the agents meet all of the teams face to face throughout the course of that 4 or 5 days. And that's when agents find out which of their clients are going to be pursued and how aggressively by other teams. And there are a lot of free agent quarterbacks this year with starting experience. It seems like every year now there are more and more veteran quarterbacks available on that offseason carousel. And I think that will make it harder for the Bears to get a substantial offer for Justin Fields, because if I can go out and try to sign one of these other guys and not give up whatever the Bears are looking for and not have to pay Justin Fields a second contract, and I could get somebody else at a much more reasonable rate and not give up any draft pick compensation, I may try that. But I think it all really starts to push toward a head next week. And then by that start of the legal tampering period, that's when the offers are going out fast and furious as teams try to fill up their seats with the available quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at teams like New England, for instance, because Washington, we're assuming, and I think appropriately so, they're going to fulfill their quarterback needs with their draft choice, right? You take a look at New England, you take a look at Atlanta, just for two teams in the top 10 there, right? You're looking at the Raiders. You do look at Tampa to see what they feel about re-signing Baker Mayfield or anything like that. The reason why I'm bringing it up is an interesting question is going to be which teams are willing to fulfill their quarterback need through the draft and which ones would prefer to do it through free agency, you know, and that's going to be the tricky question about reading tea leaves and how everything's going to come out in the wash. Mike.
And it may just be that rich teams take their shot in free agency, and if they're left without a quarterback, that creates an even greater urgency to go draft one. There are pros and cons to both approaches. You get a proven commodity in free agency, but it's going to be more expensive than what that slotted rookie contract will cost, even if it's the first overall pick. It's nothing compared to what it costs to go out and sign a really good player in free agency. So there's a lot of different ways teams can go. You know, on one hand, it's very good to have a lot of choices. The problem is at some point you got to choose one. And circumstances will get in the way. Other factors will complicate the situation. But ultimately, a lot of these teams are going to have multiple doors they can walk through, and they're going to have to pick one of them, and they're going to have to feel good about it. And they're going to be pinning the hopes of this season and maybe next season and maybe the season beyond that on this choice that they make.
Editor-in-chief, creator of Pro Football Talk, Mike Florio, here on the Wednesday before Combine Week on the Rich Eisen Show. On my previous show, I came up with the 5 top NFL spring storylines. I want to bounce a couple of off you right now. Number 3 on my top 5 list was Denver's quarterback plans. We had Sean Payton on our show the Friday of Super Bowl week, and he basically said anybody that ascribes a certain approach to us right now, we haven't even had our meetings yet. And he said they were going to happen the Monday after the Super Bowl. He even said that Russ has to be in the conversation because he's still in the building. He wants to stay there, is what he said. And he said that counts for something. So I put that in front of you as to what tea leaves you can read there, because that's one big stone in the pond here about whether Denver is going to be in the market drafting or even free agency for a quarterback.
It's not going to be Russell Wilson. It's not, unless he has some sort of epiphany that causes him to do something contractually to make himself more palatable to the Broncos. And I think there's already enough bad blood there from what happened last year, between the fact that the things went down and Russell Wilson pursued an NFLPA grievance, even though it didn't come to a grievance. There were some nasty letters exchanged. The fact that that even came out has to rankle somebody who was a Bill Parcells disciple in Sean Payton. It comes down to this. They owe him $39 million this year, no matter what. If he's on the roster March 17, they owe him another $37 million fully guaranteed next year. He will not be on the roster on March 17. His house, his 20,000 square foot, $25 million mansion is up for sale in Denver. He's moving on. And the real question to me is, will he take a 1-year bare minimum deal from someone else, make it easier for that team to put a roster around him and stick the Broncos with the balance? When all this stuff went down late in the season, that was the sense I got. We'll see how it plays out once he's cut, but I think he's going to be cut, and I think he's going to be available to anybody who wants him.
Who's going to want him?
Well, I saw he was the betting favorite to go to the Steelers, even though there was a report from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette over the weekend that the Steelers aren't interested in a veteran quarterback who wants to start, which you look at it and say, I mean, even though Russell Wilson isn't the guy that he used to be, Russell Wilson, Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, all due respect, if you could get Russell Wilson for $1.2 million for 1 year, how do you not do that? The Raiders, if spite has crept into this equation at all, and you have to assume at some level it has, and the first team that I heard when all this was going down and all the rancor was out there and there were reports and people were talking to different folks on and off the record, the Raiders were the first team I heard, because you're going straight to a rival of the Broncos. So you can stick it to the Broncos as a member of the Raiders. The question is, do the Raiders want him? And at $1.2 million, how could you say no to that, Rich? Wherever he is now, relative to what he used to be, dollar for dollar, if he's willing to do $1.2 million and give the Broncos the balance of that on their books for this year, how do you not say yes to that?
And Sean Payton during the season was honest when he was saying, "Hey, look, I got to, we got to get this right, because if I'm making the wrong decision here on this, then someone else is going to be talking to you at some point down the road." So who do you think is going to be his choice, draftee or free agents? What do you got?
The fact that they are going to move on from Russell Wilson, Rich, is going to create significant salary cap issues this year and even more so next year. They got more than $80 million in dead money they're going to have to deal with. And if they designate him as a post-June 1 release, it becomes a little bit easier. But still, they're not in a position to go out and pay market value to to Kirk Cousins or maybe a Baker Mayfield. So I think they're going to look to the draft. And, the question becomes, can Sean Payton find somebody who he believes can run his offense the way that he wants it to be run, with a lot of the important stuff happening before the snap? That's the thing you need to watch when you go back and watch Broncos games. What was really going on before the snap? What kind of sense of urgency was there? What kind of changes were being made? We see different quarterbacks doing all sorts of things and calling out all sorts of words and pointing here and pointing there. Watch Russell Wilson. There isn't a whole lot of that. I think to make any offense work well, you got to have that component. And I think that may be the thing that ultimately caused Sean Payton to give up on Russell Wilson.
And then explain June 1st cut to people, Mike, because that might mean if they do designate him post June 1, does that mean Russ is still sitting there top of the summer, still with no gig? And then most teams have already filled up, right, Mike?
Good question. It used to be that June 1 was a very active day on the NFL news cycle, because you had to literally wait until after June 1 to cut a guy and spread the ensuing salary cap charge over 2 years.
Right.
Now you can, and I think it's up to 2 per team each year, you can designate a player that you release after the league year begins as a post-June 1 cut, and that takes whatever's left of the dead money. You get this year's charge that you would have had anyway, and then whatever's left over goes next year. It's not a 50-50 split necessarily. It depends how many years are left, but it makes it a lot easier to put a guy out there. This is very pro player. It lets a team put a player out there so he can get a contract somewhere else instead of having to squat on him until June 1.
Right, and then the player has a better opportunity to find his next job. Last one for you, Mike, is the other storyline I had, number 2 overall, because number 1 was the quarterback carousel draft and free agency, which we've hit quite a bit in our chat so far. Number 2 is, what did Jerry Jones mean by all in? And that is a great question, and the key of it really is what about Dak's contract, and what happens there is the start of it, because for him to go all in and maybe bring in other players that he said they normally wouldn't be all in on, they got to have the flexibility with Dak's deal, right? So I place that all in front of you, Mike.
You've got to extend Dak Prescott's contract to have the kind of flexibility you need to add other players. His cap number this year is $59.4 million. That is only going to drop with a long-term deal that pays him more than the $40 million per year he's making now. The question is, how close to the top of the market is he going to be? But he's got, Rich, a ton of leverage. This is all the Cowboys' fault. They didn't pay him after his 3rd year in the NFL. They wrote out the 4th year of his rookie 4th-round contract. Then year 5, they paid him under the franchise tag. Year 6 is when they realized they were over a barrel, and they put a contract in place that has them over a barrel now as he enters the final year of his 4-year deal that he did after that first franchise tag, and technically when the second one had been used. He has them. And if Jerry Jones had someone in this kind of posture in any type of business relationship, he would take full advantage of it. So I shed no tears for Jerry Jones. They created this mess, and now Dak Prescott has a chance to exercise full leverage. That's the first step. And until you do a new deal with him, you really can't go all in. They have to hope that Dak Prescott decides to give them a break some way, somehow, do a reasonable deal, and leave enough cap space to take care of CeeDee Lamb. Michael Parsons is going to want to get paid. And that's even before you start thinking about who else might be out there. So all in can have a lot of different meanings. And all in the classic sense, if the Cowboys want to do it, they got one hand tied behind their back as they're pushing those chips out to the center of the table.
Yeah, I mean, and the timing on that is, this has got to get done before March 11th, right, when the window opens up. This has got to be done in the next 20 days. This has got to be already a topic of conversation here. Right?
Yeah, I mean, when the new league year begins, that's when Dak's cap number hits 59.4. That's the moment it hits. So you've got to have the new contract ready to kick in and drop that cap number.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to have to cut some guys, or you might not be able to sign some guys. I mean, it's a huge mess. Even though the cap, I was told the other day, initially 242, 243 million, and somebody that is always, I mean, bats 1,000 on these issues, said it's going to be closer to 250 than 243. We'll see. But the higher that cap number goes for all teams, the easier it is for teams to maneuver. So a lot of teams hoping for a higher number than expected this year. It makes it easier for them to get their players under the cap.
Yeah, when do we hear about that? When does that hit?
Well, it's got to be
soon.
Next week. It's got to be, because when you apply the franchise tag, and we're in the window now, the franchise tag number is, under the current CBA, in most cases, a specific percentage of the cap.
Right.
So you have to know what the cap is to know what you're committing to if you're one of these teams. So no later than 13 days from now, the last day of the franchise tag period, but it's got to come. And I think the final agreement, it's negotiated every year between the league and the union. The final agreement will be made next week in Indianapolis, if not before that.
So this is it. I mean, rubber's meeting the road. I mean, I know we're 10 days removed from the Super Bowl, but this is coming up fast. This is happening right now.
Well, this is what happens when you add a 17th game to the regular season. There's no longer a lull.
Right.
This is the lull, and there's really no lull to the lull, because it's just a minor tapping of the brakes, if anything.
All right, tell me about the ebook $3.99, right?
Yeah, and I've been reading a lot of ebooks lately, and I realize that I am pretty freaking stupid when it comes to setting a price point, because most of them are at least $10.99, $11.99, $12.99. But look, I just want people to read and enjoy the things I've written. It's not about the money, and I know anytime anybody says it's not about the money,
it is.
It's about the money. But I really don't care. I really don't care about the money. I get a lot of fulfillment from writing And I love hearing from people who have read the stuff that I've created out of nothing and enjoyed it. It fuels me to keep doing it. So $3.99 is aimed at getting maximum people to give it a try and see if they like it. And the sequel is in the works. So hopefully I'll have that maybe by football season. It all depends on how crazy this offseason really is.
Well, every now and then I'll text you about not what you're reporting on, you're writing on it. You could see that you do enjoy the actual craft of putting a sentence together and sticking the landing in a sentence, Mike, and a piece. You could see it for sure.
And Rich, and I appreciate that very much. One of the byproducts of doing this for 23 years now, I have literally written millions of words, probably more than 9-10 million, just every day, story after story after story. And it gave me a capacity I learned 4 years ago to sit down and just crank out a lot of intended fiction, not the unintended fiction that I'm often accused of.
Be well, sir. Hope to see you soon. See you in Indy, maybe.
Thanks, pal.
Take care, man. That's Mike Florio, everybody. Check out at Pro Football Talk. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.